happening, everyone? We are back. It is Friday, and Friday is always a good day. It's the end of the week. If you're still out there slaving away at work, that means you have the weekend to party and forget that you have a job. I guess that's one way to look at it. Or one more day towards financial freedom. However you decide, whatever your plan is, you're in the right ecosystem to do it in the Richard Hart class of stuff. Great stream. I'm very excited about this stream. I've been trying to get, I always want to get WaLLrus on. WaLLrus is, I love his liquid loan stuff. I tell him all the time, like, I love the updates and stuff. He talks about PulseChain and just different perspectives, different ways of thinking about things, and seems to be right a lot as well. And I've been trying to get Stoic from Coast on for a while too, and they've been heads down in the bunker trying to figure things out and trying to get the Fiat ramp on board and all kinds of fun stuff. A lot of people are working very hard in the community, building and out there doing the marketing and out there just getting people into the truest, fairest ecosystem that's maybe ever existed. Like, this is literally, PulseChain is the birth of something special. Hex was kind of kicked us off, and now I'm sure we'll get into pHex, E-Hex stuff as well. Throw your comments in if you want us to talk about that. But PulseChain is really opening up the doors for a lot of things. Coin market caps don't even gatekeeping us anymore for portions of the site at least. So anyways, let me say hi to the chat real quick. Any questions? We'll get to them in a few minutes. I just want to get these guys in here and kind of kick it off. But what's up, Crypto London? Rich S, how's it going? How's it going? Coyote Blues, welcome, man. Appreciate that. You've been saying some very nice comments, and appreciate coming on board and learning with us all. Again, the show, put in the channel description, all that, becoming the best version of yourself in the DeFi and crypto space. I feel like that's a pretty good way to describe the show. That's kind of what I like to do, and I hope we're able to achieve with it too. DAP FOMO, what's happened so early? We definitely are. Believing, always got to do that. Good afternoon to you, sir. Hex edits. I'm gonna call you Hexy edits sometimes. What's happening, man? Fox Mulder's back. What's up? And then Pineapple is RH building Fiat on ramp. We're almost finished. Your guess is as good as mine on that one. People are building Fiat on ramps. I'm not sure RH is, or if he is, he hasn't announced it yet. Win brunch, maybe about an hour or so for me. We'll see. DJ Bots, what's happening? Lunacy Point, you're a great one to end on. Appreciate you coming. And yeah, let's get into it. Welcome back to the show, WaLLrus and Stoic 0xCoast. What's happening, gentlemen?
What's going on?
How we doing, boys?
You guys bored? I'm really bored, and the last 2 weeks have been super boring.
I'm just waiting for something to go on. I haven't had anything going on. There's nothing in the news. Just taking a breather.
I'm enjoying that by the time a market cycle has started, you probably missed it. So you wake up one day and something's completely started and ended by the time you were aware of it.
It's amazing. It's amazing. It's like it's almost like dog years in crypto. It's like everything's on 10x speed. It's so fast, man.
It is pretty crazy. Like, some days I'm like, what if I just go offline for a month or two and just come back and just see what's up? Things up. I'll probably be less anxious. I'll probably worry less. I'll miss some things here and there, but like, it's probably, I really go back and forth sometimes. Like, does it even matter that, if I stream every day or 2 days a week or whatever, if your bags are packed, you're earning yield, you're waiting on the bull run, like, why do you need to look at the chart? I mean, I don't even look at the charts every day, but why do you even need to look at anything? I contemplate that sometimes. It's introspection, I guess. But 2 weeks. Today's happy anniversary to PulseChain.com. Around 2 weeks. It'll be, I guess, later today.
Infamous 2 weeks.
Yeah, two more weeks. Isn't it? What is the meme now? I got a hat that says 2 more weeks. Now the hat should say 2 weeks, or like when 2 more weeks until 10,000x. Maybe we'll rename it. But let's kick it off with that. Maybe WaLLrus, take us through what has been the most surprising thing in the last 2 weeks. Like, what is something that, we were talking about launch plans. We were talking about, I had you on stream about 2 or 3 weeks ago about like, hey, what do we think is going to happen? We're all, all speculation for time to time over. What is happening where you're like, whoa, I never saw that coming?
Volume. It's the volume of transactions. I realized that turned into like a gas fee thing, and it rubs some people wrong. I think that's kind of an interesting thing to kind of look through in a few ways. But the volume, I think we all knew, hey, there's going to be a rush of traffic, but I don't think we thought it was going to be like blocks filled rush of traffic. Right. That was pretty surprising. So I think the combination of just volume and how that affected gas fees and a few things was really surprising. it had some interesting consequences, right? So while it did add some negative sentiment because people thought that, hey, if I have 1 to 10 pulse, like that was kind of the standard logic for a long time. Hey, if you got anything, that's enough to transact, right? And then it quickly wasn't because of volume. So there's a few things like little interesting threads, I think. One is I do think that changed some of the economics a bit, similar to like the slowing of the bridge. So anytime you have like velocity from certain players and not others, you start to change the narrative and the movement a little bit, right? Like there's some physics difference on how those funds would have moved. So I think that's pretty interesting. I think that while, again, we would always want things to be fair, we would have liked to have everyone able to transact at the time. I do think that it interestingly gave a bit of like a tip of the cap to the early sacrificers, the people who were in PulseChain the earliest. They had the least amount of issues moving funds around. And so I guess I'm just trying to like work through how it happened, not even saying good or bad. That's just what happened, right? People who had sacked had plenty of pulse to throw around. So they maybe not necessarily like first shot, but they definitely got more shots in, right? People underestimated how much pulse they would need. I think all that played out. And then something else that's kind of interesting, I think, is in sort of a short window there. I think that Pulse, because it was so useful as gas, was price negative. The amount of people using Pulse was so useful that it was negative on the price in the short term because it sort of ruined some of like the gas fee narrative for a short time there. So I think it was interesting that so many people used PulseChain that it was negative on price, even though you think of like adoption as a wave of like being so positive. So I don't know, again, price, especially so early on, a few participants in any order move these things around so violently. But there's just a few interesting things there I thought were pretty cool about just how that ended up kind of influencing some of that early narrative and movement and fees and who was getting what and where. So I think it was the volume. That was definitely what I think caught me the most off guard.
And the bridge being backed up, that never bothered me because I took that as build up FOMO. I took that as, hey, it's going to be processed, like we got time. But the only thing that I think could have been, I don't know, it's hard to say. I mean, maybe I guess Richard's got 40 chess going on. He's got the war room. He's got the whiteboard. He's probably got all of this planned out. Sure, there's some surprises, but overall, I think it's probably got a pretty solid plan. But the ability for people not to come in who didn't sack and didn't have pulse, that surprised me. I was like, there's a ton of people. I'm making videos, all this stuff, and I'm like, people are asking questions. How do I get pulse? I can't transact. I can bridge stuff over. I can pay the ETH fee, but I don't have pulse. Is there any way? And the question for both of you: is there any way that is it just a means to have a dedicated faucet that a certain amount of supply was set aside for, or was that holding back people from onboarding? You think they'll still come on board? Could that have been better? I don't know. What was your all's take on that?
So I'll just jump in quickly, and then I know he'll have a lot more of the expertise on some of the onboarding. So I definitely want to give him plenty of runway. So, I mean, there was a variety of things, right? I think part of it is we underestimated how many people are going to want to use it, right? So if you just kind of say that, hey, there's 1,000 people that want to do something. If there was 10, we could have just talked to the 10, right? But it quickly gets out of hand and then you can't handle it, right? So it's kind of an exponential issue a bit there. So I think it was just volume. I think it was just the volume of everything coming as it did. So many players. Sometimes we think of this, it's like, man, it's been 2 years, right? It's insane. So I think it was just scale, right? There were a few little miscues, like making sure the validators were as funded as they should have been, validators for the bridge, a couple little things here and there. But again, I don't think there was any real issues. I think it was just scale. And so if you miss in terms of scale, then you don't have the right solution. So we could have done different things for, having more faucets up, but there were faucets, a lot of community faucets. I mean, there was kind of a variety of options, and some things like on-ramps, you just don't have them yet, right? This stuff takes time, right? So it's, especially when you get to anything that needs infrastructure, those things take time, right? And a lot of times you're kind of at the mercy of other players in the system. So I think it really just all come down to scale. But for the most part, bad news is still good news. So I think, again, I kind of made fun of a few of the other communities that were kind of trying to take their 15 minutes of fame. I think anytime people put that much energy into something they hate, they just end up loving it anyway, right? You just keep talking about it and talking about it. So I mean, it's always going to be bumpy, right? If it wasn't these issues, it'd have been different issues. If it wasn't any issues, then it would have just been the price chart, right? Like, stuff just moves around. Like, that's the nature of the beast. There's just too many moving pieces here. So I think overall it was really successful. I think most people are just glad it's here and we're moving on. And again, I think if you pull one lever, you would have changed something else, right? So I think overall, looking at the scale stuff, I think it was pretty easy.
Yeah, definitely agree. Well, speaking of the Fiat RMs too, it's is that something that, now we're listed on OKX, and so there's, if you want to use centralized exchange, there's an option to do that. There's bridging from Ethereum and stuff like that. How does, perfect fitting question for Stoic, I imagine on this one, how does a fiat on-ramp play into that? Like, what problem does it solve? And your all solution or any other one, how does it get the economic energy back and forth, and people want to use it over the other solutions that we already have?
Yeah, so I mean, it depends on the thing that you're trying to optimize for. If you're trying to optimize for speed, then centralized exchanges are typically the best. If you're trying to optimize for sovereignty, then it takes a little bit longer, right? So, we're trying to create a system with the minimal amount of custody support, where you can basically go from your bank account to the chain, in a matter of seconds. That's not necessarily easy to do, but it creates a bunch of design parameters that you have to build around. And so, look, we've been trying as best we can to make sure that movement is seamless and there are as few steps as possible. Because the problem with volume and the problem with blocks being full and the amount of transactions we're trying to do is that there's too many steps in the process, and there's too much lag for people to be able to do this efficiently unless they're highly skilled blockchain users already. And that is an impediment to onboarding not only people from other communities and other chains, but people who are new to crypto generally and want to put some money into these things, right? So I come from an e-commerce background, and when you're doing shopping cart stuff, depending on how you optimize your cart, you're looking at like 25 to 30% drop-offs in every step along the way. This is why sometimes you want to have fewer colors in a shirt, because the fewer options you have for someone, the more likely they are to check out. That's why, you don't want to have 40 of them. You want to have 2, right? And that's why you don't want to provide PayPal necessarily. You just want to have a credit card. So that's sort of where we've come to it from. Like, how do we reduce these friction points? And so the friction points that I'm talking about are like, I used the bridge. I waited 80 hours for one of those transactions to go through. And I did them in both directions, right? Just testing. But like 80 hours is no good for a new user, right? Because not only is it the lag because they have to leave and come back, but you've also got the anxiety that they have during that whole period. And if you're a new crypto user, 80 hours of anxiety because you've bridged 10 grand just doesn't work for you. And so there's people who avoid it for that reason, and there's people who won't use it again for that reason, because the uncertainty just creates a problem for them. And that's an emotional thing largely, and it's an experience thing largely. But what I'm sort of trying to get across is that, like, we have to create ways to get the economic energy on chain where it's at least close to instantly available. And if we can't achieve that, we're going to, not drive people away, but they're going to be less convinced to use these tools and get onto the chain, is what I'm trying to say.
I think just quick there, all right, there's, when it comes to the exchanges, I mentioned this, but I also think it's important for some of the stuff like what Stoic and his crew are building. That stuff is positive, even for people who never use it. So I mentioned this about the exchanges. People will just say, oh, what all exchanges is it on? They don't ask, is it on the exchange they use? Because most people only use 1, maybe 2. There's just value in it, right? It's like market cap or any of these other sort of like vanity metrics. People just feel comfortable. So if someone's like, what's PulseChain? You tell them, and they're like, what exchange is it on? And you go, this one, this one, this one, this one, and there's 2 fiat on-ramps. They'll, even if they come over the bridge, they still like the answer. They feel better about those things. So having that like fullness and optionality as a whole quickly is really valuable. And then specifically for like what Stoic's talking about, people who actually fall into any one of these segments where that is the best tool for them, you have to have it for them. But it's just a net positive thing overall, just across the whole ecosystem.
Definitely. I mean, that's something that I know a lot of people are tired of using Coinbase. They're tired of using it'd be nice to have just the easy way in and out, minimal information, maximum privacy, all that stuff. And especially when PulseChain, PulseX, all this stuff do the gains that we believe, they were designed to do, that we believe they will do one day. And to that question too, a lot of people, I've heard this question a lot, like people asking, hey, can you talk about how to cash out, how to take money on and off? I mean, a lot of people, if you believe you're going to make a lot of money and you want to take profit, they want to believe the service they're using is trustworthy and reputable, and they're not going to, send, do $1 million, $5 million, whatever, and then it's going to get frozen, and, they're going to get swatted and all this stuff. Stoic, can you kind of speak to that too of when people make mad gains, or when and if they make mad gains, how would they use your fiat on-ramp? Are there limitations? Are there things they need to do, call their bank or make arrangements? Or is it just like real estate transactions that are hundreds or millions of dollars sometimes? Like how can people use it as an off-ramp for mad gains?
Well, let's think about this from a user intention perspective, right? So a lot of people who are new to PulseChain have seen friends, family, associates and stuff get incredibly wealthy with Hex, right, over the last couple of years. And a lot of those people who were very, very early have been able to essentially replace work, right? No longer have to have a job. I can live off crypto. This is the sort of attitude that a lot of those people have had. And a huge number of people who have been convinced that if you can get those mad gains, you can replace work, right? I can quit my job. I can live off crypto. The only way that works is if you can get economic energy from the chain to your bank account quickly so that you can pay your electricity bill and pay off your car and all those sorts of things. So when we talk about fiat on-ramps, in the context of our tool, what we're building, we really mean actually a fiat on-ramp, a fiat off-ramp, a digital account, the ability to transact within your digital account between crypto and fiat. It's a very rich feature set that we sort of encapsulate with the term fiat on-ramp, because obviously our main intention is to get economic energy onto the chain, but it really doesn't work unless you have the reverse going. So from my perspective, it's really important to have that off-ramp going so that I can pay our attorneys, right? Because they don't take USDC yet. Hopefully someday they will, but until that happens, I've still got to send wires and write checks and stuff, right?
You mean CST?
CST, sure. Yeah. If and when it exists. I can talk about that at some point if you like, but that's sort of the philosophy, right? Like if we're all going to use this to make these mad gains, we have to be able to convert that stuff and make transactions in the real world. And until that's a ubiquitous thing where you can, do it as easily as a Venmo transaction, right? That's kind of the standard, right? Like if we can make a PulseChain transaction as simple as, hey, you just scan my QR code and Venmo me, well, then we've won. But until that happens, like the friction points just make this unachievable for most people.
I think a lot of that anxiety too comes from with like mad gains. Like that's what we say when we mean a lot. But I think when people say it in the context of like, what do I do with like any of that? What do I do now? Kind of vibe. It's because they've tiered up something they're not used to doing, right? So again, using Venmo, right? So if I was like, hey, RHMax, I got that $100. It's like, all right, cool. I just sent it. If it's 100,000, now I have anxiety because I've never sent 100,000. I may have never even done a transaction that size, right? Or $1 million, or $1.5 million, or 500K, or maybe you've only dealt in hundreds and it's the first time that you're sending a 5-digit transaction. So I think a lot of times it's also, can I just do the same thing? Even if it's the same process, like you said, do I call my bank even? Like, do I alert them that I have a big wire transfer coming? So I think part of that is that people, you want to start treating some of this stuff like you've already made it so that you can start to work through that process, right? A lot of these things, we almost like become the person we want to be along the way. There's all those talks about like the journey is what gets you there. Sometimes that's what can cause some of the, usually sometimes it falls under like the sudden wealth syndrome, or we just talk about, who is it? Not D01. There's that other famous hex dumper who spent like 60 grand to swap in MetaMask. He's probably never done it. He probably never had that amount of money to know that thing was different. So we talk about it a lot of times with like how we make transactions, right? So it starts with, if you have a small bag, it's gas fees. The larger your bag gets, it's order execution. I don't want slippage, right? If I'm moving 100K, 30 cents, $3, $30, it's all the same number to me. I could care less. But 0.5% more, 1% more slippage, like that starts to really impact the bag. So it's the same thing here, that as we start to level up and we like hit these next tiers, as far as like whatever that amount is for everyone individually, we don't know what to look for, right? So if you're moving a couple $100 around, you're like, okay, I wait till Sundays, it's gas fees. And then all of a sudden you got 30 grand. What you just look for gas fees and you don't pay the same amount of attention to the slippage because you're not used to that. You're not conditioned for that. So it's not just for gains, but just in general, just like how you're going to handle these things in real life. I think it's important that people start treating it like they have it. Like, okay, I've got $1,500, 15 grand, whatever it is in your treasure wallet. Okay. Are you treating that like it's 1.5 million? You should be. Are you, do you have those plans in place for however, like even when we say we're taking profit, are we taking profit and we're rolling it into real estate? Are we buying a property? Are you diversifying? Or are you just taking it in cash and you're going to actually just, like you said, light bill, spend it? So the higher that amount comes, like people want to be more clear on language and start realizing like, okay, what part of the formula is more impactful now?
I love the way Coffee puts it too. He talks about treating every one hex as $1. And if you do that, you'll think differently about it. And I'm like, wow, that is such a powerful way to think. And you can apply that to anything. You can treat every pulse like 1 cent, like $1, whatever it is. That keeps you from overspending or being reckless, or it makes you think twice before you make this trade, or otherwise put it at risk. So, yeah, Stoke too. I wanted to. Can you just walk through the process again? Like, say 6 months, a year, 2 years from now, you got the platform up and running, people are using it. How would people actually use that to, or is it the platform? Like, is it the platform that can support millions of dollars? Is it the platform that can, both ways? If there's whales or people who they're trading real estate for crypto, they've decided, the market turns or one way or the other, risk on, risk off. I love the way that WaLLrus, I watched the video this morning about I forget what the title was, but he talked about risk on, risk off and how investors make decisions around that. And can they use your platform, or are there other platforms that would support it? And why would they use it? Is it what incentives are there to use this as a on and off ramp?
Yeah, so things are changing on our end incredibly quickly. Things are different now than they were an hour and a half ago for us, based on one conversation with our attorneys. Because, like I said, like what we're doing is we're designing product around different restrictions and requirements, and those things are fluid. And every now and then, you think of something where you'll be able to tweak your product, change it, and then release something else. And you go to your attorney thinking, well, there's no way that they're going to approve this. And they say, actually, yeah, you can do that. You just have to mod your terms and conditions a little bit. And you don't think it's possible, right? So the very, very, very simple answer is we think we're going to be up and running with CST much faster than we thought, because two of the design restrictions that we had placed upon us were either, one, custody support through our digital account service provider, which is Prime Trust, which we announced the other day on Twitter Spaces, who are supported by Fireblocks, who run the node infrastructure for them. So the biggest thing was getting Fireblocks to support that. We've had very positive conversations with them in the last 24 hours. I can't go into specifics, unfortunately, but let's just say it's further along than we even hoped it could be. And then secondly, the other option available to us is potentially utilizing Oracle services like Telor, and in this case, Fetch, which is provided in the very near future by Liquid Loans. So, we were relying on one of those things to happen in order to release CST. And we thought that was a requirement. We've since decided, okay, well, let's say if we wanted to get to market faster, could we do it without those things if we made these design changes? And we took those to our attorneys yesterday, and they said, yeah, actually, you probably can do that. Let's just mod the terms. So, it's not going to be available in the beta next week that we release, which will still be an ETH USDC thing. But on PulseChain testnet, probably in the next 2 weeks, we'll have live CST that will be minting, or the user will be minting from their own digital account balance, which is, pretty exciting. I don't know if we'll get to market before anybody else has a native stablecoin on PulseChain. In fact, we're sort of coin agnostic in a sense, right? Like, we'll do it with our own coin if we have to, but ultimately our value add to the ecosystem is fiat on-ramp to everybody's coin. And so, if we have to do it with our own, like I said, we will. But ideally, you can buy USDL through the USDL website, supported by some back-end Coast infrastructure at some point. That's the vision that we have here. Is we really, like I said, we'll make this change. We'll do the legwork to get this going. But hey, it'd be better if you could just buy your favorite coin on PulseChain. So that's where we want to get to.
Oh, so beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. And just for people watching too, the beta. So I don't know if you described on the Twitter space yesterday or not, but how to, minting stables, do they just connect to bank account? Can you just do a high level, how are people going to use the beta?
Yeah, easy. So you have to create an account, which is just an email and password confirmation. Then you have to go through basically 3 KYC steps. KYC is provided to our banking partner by a third party called Socure. So all that you really need to confirm when you're doing KYC is that the information that you provide in a very simple form that is provided to Prime Trust per your user agreement with them matches up to your personal identifying information on your driver's license, right? So as long as those 2 things match, pretty much you'll be approved for KYC. You don't have to link a bank account yet. You obviously will need to in order to transact, but you don't have to at that point. You'll get through account sign up with KYC, and effectively what you have at that point is a borderless digital bank account. Technically, the assets in that digital account are custodied in the US, in Nevada by Prime Trust, who are a Nevada registered trust company. So you can custody fiat with them, you can custody crypto with them. It's all in the one digital account, which makes it very, very useful. And if you want to create, let's say you're an Australian user and you want to use an Australian bank account, you can. Let's say you're a user in Malaysia and you want to use a British bank account, you can. It's an incredibly powerful tool, this digital account. And that's why we went with Prime Trust as opposed to, just being able to do Visa, MasterCard processing, right? Like, yes, off-ramp is super important, but being able to custody those assets is pretty useful as well, especially when you're dealing with users who aren't as technically proficient and maybe don't want to have large amounts of money on, an external self-hosted wallet. So, yeah, look, you should consider creating an account with Coast as being very similar to going down to your bank and opening an account. That's you having a user agreement with our banking partner, Prime Trust. We're just a tech layer that's facilitating you doing that. And then you have this thing that you can use to transact in and out of Ethereum with USDC, or in the very near future, you'll be able to interact with CST on PulseChain. There are a couple of little tweaks to the system. So we've sort of taken design inspiration for CST from Trust Token, one-to-one fiat backed, you mint it yourself, etc. And then we've taken design inspiration from Gemini for the user experience. So, basing everything around this one sort of digital account hub that you have, where there's deposits and withdrawals to it in fiat, and there's deposits and withdrawals to it and from it in crypto as well. So it just becomes your sort of home base.
Gotcha. Yeah, there's a couple questions in the chat about using it from different states. I think somebody asked New York, California. Is there any restrictions, or is it universal around the states?
Yeah, so we're restricted by the locations where Prime Trust has a money transmitter license. So when I talk about design parameters, that's one of the design parameters we have to build around, right? Is having a banking partner and where they can operate, because we don't have money transmission licenses and we don't want to go get them because there's an enormous regulatory burden to do it. There's huge overhead in terms of the amount of money you have to put up in reserve accounts to be able to do it, to verify, or sorry, to back your money transmission services. So we're trying to do it without that. And that creates design restrictions that we've, basically overcome. In terms of the questions that are coming up here, can you operate in Canada in the beta? No, it'll just be the US, except for Hawaii, New York, Texas, Connecticut, and South Dakota. That's because of the money transmission licenses that Prime Trust has. They don't have them in those locations right now, and they're working on it as fast as they can. For example, for Texas users, this is simply a matter of the fact that their CEO was the person who was on the money transmission license in Texas, and they changed CEOs. And Texas doesn't have a good system for changing the name on a money transmission license. You have to revoke it and then apply for a new one. So, there's all of these little, like I said, challenges or parameters that we have to deal with. But those are the states that will be excluded from the beta. But then as soon as humanly possible, we will have Australia, Canada, and the UK up and running as well, with no state or territory restrictions in those places. That's just a matter of going through final compliance checks with Prime Trust to let us operate in those places. We're already set up with KYC. We've already done alpha users in those places. We're ready to go. Just have to check a couple of compliance boxes and we'll be off and running.
Wow. That's the biggest thing about PulseChain. There's, and we'll get into more PulseChain and Hex and stuff in a minute. But just the fact that it's been 2 weeks, we don't even have single-sign staking yet on PulseX. We don't have limit orders. Almost none of the community projects have launched the portals, such as yours as well. It's just like this rolling awesomeness that's going to be coming this entire year and into next too. So it's a lot to be like. No one should be bored out there. I had a question for you though. Have you talked to the Tetra team? Because I talked to Neil for T-Shares here the other day, and we were talking about different ways, DeFi automation and different ways to connect different products and stuff like that. And he mentioned about passive income. Like, would it be interesting if used the product to or like Tetra to do stuff around automatic passive income, where it's like, okay, I automatically talk to a fiat off ramp once my yield comes, and then it automatically goes to my bank account. That's sort of like dream. It seems like for a lot of people too. Are you doing any, or have you talked to any teams about DeFi automation or other ways to interact with the other products that are launching?
Yeah, if that's for me, I can answer quickly. Look, automation basically requires Oracle services, like a Chainlink listener, or in this case, a fetch Oracle. It's very hard to do it without that. In fact, the solution that we have for some CST related design stuff is really just utilizing a failsafe that would need to be employed for an automation service anyway. So can you automate things? Yeah, it's a little challenging. We have had conversations with other teams about doing it. But if you're going to automate things, you probably have to have backups too. And so that's part of what our discussion with legal was today is, hey, if we're going to have this backup anyway, can we just utilize it? Because that gets us to where we need to be, despite the fact that it's a human pushing a button instead of an Oracle service pushing a button. So those conversations are happening. I think one of the things that I was going to answer earlier for it was WaLLrus's question about what he's most surprised by, like the level to which everybody else is accessible to try and make things work is just incredible. Like the guys at Liquid Loans, especially the folks at Power City, everybody else who's trying to build things is just so open to chatting and making things better, and going outside the scope of what they do to try and help you and make introductions and things like that. It's not a lot of stuff that's seen publicly, right? But it's happening behind the scenes like a lot. I've had 4 or 5 calls about, with other team leaders and stuff in the last 48 hours doing things like that. So it's just tremendous. And I'm sorry that people can't see all the work that goes into it and all the connections that are being made, but hopefully it translates in the products that we get to put out in the next few months.
One more question here before we move on to about the platform for Prime Trust. Are coins still in our wallet, own keys? Is there a way for it to collapse, lose our money like Silicon Valley Bank?
Yeah, so Prime Trust is a trust company, not a bank. So that's an important distinction to make. So when you have fiat custodied with Prime Trust, it's held in one of 200 depository organizations. So banks with FDIC insurance. So in terms of the actual fiat, you have FDIC insurance on all of your funds. It's not like Silicon Valley Bank taken and then put into some sort of securitized investment product, right? That's not going to happen. It's just held in fiat. So it's not held in your bank account, but it's held in an FDIC insured account in your name as part of a ledger. In the sense of the crypto, however, I need to distinguish here a little bit between like different onboarding flows. So like for US users, if you're going from ACH in your bank account, you can ACH directly into USDC that is automatically withdrawn to your external wallet. And it doesn't actually touch your digital account. It just goes from bank account all the way through in about 10, 12 seconds. There's Ethereum transactions and confirmations and stuff, but at least with an ACH, you can do it directly. With a wire, obviously, we don't know that you've sent a wire until it hits your digital account, right? So when it hits your digital account, it can actually be released to you, but it requires a second transaction. So you make a credit card or debit card or a wire transaction, it appears as a deposit in your digital account. And then you have to, again, decide what you want to swap it for. And there's a very minimal swap fee provided by Prime Trust. But while your assets are in your digital account, they're custodied by Prime Trust, and the private keys for that are held by them by the trust company in Nevada. So if you're holding assets in your digital account, they're not technically on your wallet, but you can at least remove them to your wallet quite quickly by utilizing the Fiat on-ramp. And that's honestly something that I would recommend if you're conscious about those things, is right. Like if you don't feel comfortable having them custody together, get them out, right? Swap them for that USDC, swap them for that CST, get them on your own external wallet, your self-hosted wallet, and then you're good, right? We're just trying to provide the rails to help you do that. Ultimately, you shouldn't be using any service that it has your private keys for assets or custodying assets in excess of what your risk tolerance is.
For sure. Yeah, super excited about all the projects coming, like we said, especially this one's been in the mix for a long time. Yeah, curious to see how weight fits into that and the other slew of things. I know you guys, it seems like, at least on your website, it seems like you got some other things in the work or here and there. So very exciting. And like I said a million times, you guys seem very serious, very dedicated, and to building and helping the community and making great products, solid stuff. So very excited to see the beta come out as well. Did want to, so I know people are going to ask in the chat too. So I wanted to kind of frame this one as, because I know WaLLrus especially it seems like he has an interesting perspective on this. Recently, I think as of yesterday, the pulls on PulseX, the E-Hex and the pHex pull was pulled, if you will, and it was finished. And a lot of speculation was around people or merging and staking, or maybe there's like a bunch of proof of that happening as well. And then that led to this whole discussion around the community of E-Hex dying or E-Hex strong or and all that stuff. So how do you want to, what is the best way to kind of pick this apart where we can think clearly about it and not just be this like holy war? Like you can make the case for one or the other or for both, but like I really want to kind of see what we can get out of this to be meaningful, other than people just dumping their bags and fear and FUD and all that. Where do you want to start on that? Easy question, I know.
Yeah, it's so for me. Always, I think that it's maybe 60% as dopaminergic as it seems right now on Twitter, where everyone has these very rough opinions to either side. I never thought the pairing between them, like actually doing the like EP pools, that was nothing I ever thought made too much sense. Not from maybe not like just from itself, but just the way these things move, right? Like there's arbitrage issues, especially when things get slow, things lose peg. It's kind of a tricky thing, especially early on. There's just a lot of nuance to making those things function well. And there are also nuances that people don't really do well. So like, when it comes to like talking about like DAI or E-Hex, when it comes over the bridge, is it worth the same? Kind of, sort of, as long as it's on the other side and then you put it in a pool where it's not depegged, but it's worth the same. Like that's such a hard conversation to kind of like work through with people. So the pools themselves are always, it's tricky. So I never thought it was something that I wasn't as bullish on it as the rest of the I guess kind of the consensus on it. I think the E-Hex dying narrative is short. Even if it is, say it breaks down to something like 80-20, 80% on the PulseChain side and 20% on the E-Hex side, that's still a lot of room, right? So, I mean, even if you talk about what some of these people's price goals were beforehand, if it does 10-20% of those, that's still a very, very logical investment. I've seen people kind of take both sides. I'm one of those that when I'm not sure, I talk about it all the time. If I'm not sure, I'm going to take the cheap one. So I'll still probably buy all these things for the most part. Anytime anything is down 97% on something that you have a lot of trust in, that has all the same positives that we've talked about, doesn't have to do much, right, to be very, very plus positive. So it doesn't even have to have some of the old sort of price chart upside 10,000x again type of narrative to be very, very worthwhile, especially when you look at the yield curve. So again, if everybody that's 5 years out, what do you care what the price is today? And if people keep EESing along the way, it just keeps upping the yield. So I think that it's overblown. It doesn't really make much sense to me to just let E-Hex die off. I've seen a lot of the narratives, and there's a lot of interesting takes, right? You can look at Bitcoin cash split. You can see where things have started as the year ERC20s that move their own change, like BNB is kind of another one. There's a lot of kind of historical models to look through. But I think that we can be overconfident in taking from some of those because this one's so different where, again, there's such a time locked mechanic and the code itself wasn't changed, right? Like Hex is the same on either side. What you basically have is the difference in networks. So I think it's overblown a bit. Again, it's hard to think that anything that doesn't die that's down 97% isn't a asymmetrical risk, but I get both sides, right? So as usual, I'm kind of on the fence on it, but I think it's way overblown right now.
Yep. What do you think, Stoic?
I mean, to make the case for E-Hex remaining or, not dying off at the very least, look, it was a great product before PulseChain. Everybody liked it. It didn't stop being a good product because PulseChain launched. In fact, it has more utility because a huge amount of the gas fees that used to be involved in Ethereum are now gone because PulseChain has taken away that system bloat, right? So it's more efficient to end a hex stake today than it was a year ago. That gives it more utility. You've got a copy of your coins on Pulse, and I think it's obviously fantastic to be over there utilizing them. But I think there's a couple of things that people haven't considered when they make the case that pHex is just going to blow eHex away. The first would be, right now when you've got the price of Pulse where it is, yes, it's much more efficient in terms of economic value to end a hex stake on Pulse. Maybe that gives it more utility. But if we get 1,000x from Pulse, what does that do to the cost of ending a stake, right? Now, I mean, it could be a very significant thing. Like, let's imagine a situation in a year's time where it's actually more expensive to end a hex stake on PulseChain than it is on Ethereum. There's a non-zero chance that happens. And if it does, I mean, you could potentially see more capital going back into eHex side, or at least it not leaving, right? You've also got to consider the number of people who have been in this for a long time and very, very proficient in blockchain and the amount of economic energy they have tied up in the Ethereum hex side. And I think they're very unlikely, to go for the narrative that, hey, I should just let this die on the vine and go over somewhere else, right? The only other thing I would say in addition to that is something I've mentioned on Twitter. Like, if you're into copies, right, and you want copies of things and you think there's value from getting copies of things, and you'd utilize them, even if it's just to farm them to go back into the original thing. It's interesting that you mentioned Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, because if you got your Bitcoin Cash copy and you sold it when Richard told you to, and you went back into Bitcoin, you had 12% more Bitcoin, right? So you can utilize it that way. But you have to own the thing that's going to be copied. Let's say someone comes along someday and decides they want to launch a new EVM chain. Are they going to fork PulseChain or are they going to fork Ethereum? Which system state are they going to copy? I would put it to you that they're more likely to copy the Ethereum system state rather than the PulseChain system state, because they would want to reward the people who are involved in Ethereum. So, I don't think it's a simple narrative that eHex is just going to die and we all need to migrate and that's fine. I think you could make a very compelling case, and I hope I just have, that Ethereum has some staying power and eHex has some staying power as a result.
Just the last thing on those as well. We also haven't seen a cycle with all the stuff that's been built on top yet. So HSIs, Maximus, the Hedron, what Stakehouse are doing, the pool party, there's all this new optimization and gameplay and ways to interact with sort of Hex being this underlying asset that we haven't really seen through a cycle yet. So we have things, and maybe their newness is worn off a bit to us because we're, again, this stuff moves so fast, and now there's PulseChain. So now we're on to a new thing, but we haven't even seen another bull run where we're really going to get to see, how impactful, how price positives are either these derivatives, movable stakes, pooled stakes, all these variations we've seen. So I don't think that we can just say, oh, well, the stake is higher on ETH. There's a lot of different ways to engage with that around it if you're trying to sort of optimize for a certain bag size. So again, I agree with the points on Stoic, but there's a lot of value that we haven't seen that could have still affect the price positive nature and how it'll handle itself the next bull run.
Yeah, I like Hex on both chains, and I don't think I'm going to seriously consider either way until I hear Richard say something about it. And I don't know if that's going to happen in his next live stream or what, but there's all these video clips of him saying different things over different time periods. And I just, maybe that's a couple good questions from this too, is what would be the benefits of if, Richard gets on there, like, all right, guys, the whole purpose was to it was actually a migration. I know it wasn't clear, but it's a migration. And then eHex takes a huge backseat there. Although I still feel like there's going to be a lot of whales who are just never going to give up, and it's just going to be this thing. It's going to have a significantly lower price, probably. The market will decide, but I can never see it fully dying. But I can see, let's just say that, and then who benefits the most from that happening? Of there being this one hex thing, who benefits from there just being PulseChain hex, and the other hex was just the original that's it's just kind of kicked around at this point. Whoever wants to take it.
Well, I mean, new users, right? New users who are only going to buy one and don't have copies, right? Everybody since PulseChain came about has got to use their economic energy, and they have to make a choice between the assets that they buy. And they're not in the fortunate situation that all the previous people were, of having both and being able to make the choice. So for new users, I mean, you could make the case that pHex is the way to go, and that's where they should focus their attention if they believe in PulseChain. So that's the case that I would make there.
Yeah, I've said on a tweet too, just the ability to, if that did happen, or if it didn't, if there was still, eHex and pHex, and that was just, liquidity bonded or whatever, there's a premium discount, however it works out, if they still continued to exist for years and years and years, to me, onboarding would just be like, okay, well, if you buy hex, it's on PulseChain. Also, I think there's always going to be Ethereum hex bridged over. So if you want to buy the eHex, it's there too. And it's always available. Like, it's always going to be nearby, that kind of thing. So I think that's could make onboarding a little bit easier. Definitely the narrative we want to make it as easy as possible and less confusing. And I think there's a way to do it. It just hasn't been completely fleshed out yet, because a lot of the, Fiat on-ramps and otherwise haven't quite made it easy to do anything in the ecosystem yet.
Max, could I mention a couple of interesting use cases? Because WaLLrus was talking about derivatives and stuff there for a second. I thought I might mention two that I found super interesting. They're both with HSIs. I had a friend very recently who utilized HSIs to buy some real estate, to buy his neighbor's house. I thought that was pretty cool. I don't think it was the full amount, but it was maybe half. So that's a pretty cool innovation that someone's been able to convince someone to take an HSI, basically on the value of the T shares in that HSI, which I thought was pretty awesome. And then again on HSIs, I've heard of a lot of people who are creating these for their kids, or friends and family, relatives and stuff who have a kid who's going to go to college at a certain point, and they're just creating HSIs that last until that time, and then giving away the T shares in the HSI. I think those are two pretty good use cases. So, in terms of adoption, I had never heard about anything like that a couple of years ago with Hex, but all of these additional feature sets that are being built and becoming more ubiquitous make more things like that possible. And so we're seeing the evolution of this, and we're seeing it go in the direction of adoption, and it's pretty exciting.
I actually got to see that in person. I met Hex is the Way. We were at Dallas at one of the big stops when Orbit and all those guys were rolling around. He actually won, I think it was like 5,000 Hex. I don't remember what it was, but he was excited that Hex would be on two chains because he has two boys. So they each have a stake on there. I can't remember, which kid got which chain, but I thought that was really cool. So I've actually seen that in person. So that was pretty powerful. I'll probably never forget that, man. He's a good guy. And then seeing that, again, all of us care, right? Again, legacy and a lot of this cool stuff, especially when you start talking about, years as a time frame. So I've seen that in person, and it's very, very cool to see your neighbor too. That stuff's way more impactful than a short story. That stuff is awesome. That is badass. I love seeing that.
It is the major proponent of 1Hex being that it's hard to, are we always going to have the stock split? What do you guys think about this? Are we always going to have the stock split type of thing? They're going to add up to, it's always going to be half, or, one's going to go more than the other. And it's going to be hard to get to $1, hard to get back to all-time highs. Is that even the motivation of wanting 1Hex? Is the entire ecosystem? Will the entire ecosystem always be worth half because we have two copies now? And is that good or bad? What do you guys think about that?
Oh, that's a good question.
I think mostly it comes down to personal interest and anxiety, right? People just get anxious because they don't know. They want to be on the right side. There's not a lot of room for nuance in there. So even even like which hex is better, how much you selling it to me for? Like if you know what I mean, like these things all have prices, right? Like bonds, certificates of deposits, and a lot of places with a lot of different, again, feature sets, custodians, whatever it is, they have different prices, right? So, give me 10-1 odds on eHex. All right, well, like maybe, okay, is it 10 times better? Is the narrative of Pulse 15 times, 20 times, right? Like at some point, everything is worth a value statement, right? Like I know people that bought Iraqi dinars after the war, hoping it went back up again, right? Now, for the most part, it didn't. But at some point, there's asymmetrical risk on what you can get something in at. So I don't think this is even a one ring to rule them all, which side of this and that. These things can also measure locally, right? So even if you think eHex is eventually going to go down at some point, well, it bounced like 40% off the bottom. So if you were the last one who actually bought the bottom, eHex is already doing a pretty awesome thing. You're up 40%, right? So I think it's a lot of the stuff is also like locally, right? Same thing with, again, some of the HSIs and derivatives. So they're not always price positive or price negative, right? If it's same thing as like Grayscale. When Grayscale is at a premium, it's price positive, right? And when it's negative, it's starting to hold the price down. So these things can oscillate. So it depends on when we're measuring them as well. So again, it's a very loaded conversation. Hopefully that everyone's getting you can't digest all of it, but hopefully everyone can pick a few things that they like from all the speakers, myself, Stoic, and yourself, Max, and they just add some clarity to allow people to make their decisions. Right. The short answer is the market decides all these things, and so we just try to take advantage of where there's value.
Yeah, I've never thought of a future without eHex. I've always thought that there's going to be two, we're going to figure it out. And that I've always assumed the market would be like, okay, that's, I don't know what the price is going to be, but they're going to be around. They're going to be bridged over. There's going to be interesting stuff built on top of them to use both of them, maybe use one in one case and one in the other. And then I just don't think a lot of people, funny enough, I don't think a lot of people care about PulseChain launching. I think a lot of the people with Ethereum Hex, they're locked for 15 years. I'm pretty sure Godwell didn't like set his alarm, and he's not like freaking out over PulseChain launch right now. I just think the economic energy on Ethereum for all the other projects, for Hedron and everything else, is just there. And it's so big and so powerful that to me, like it's hard for me to make a case for it going away. But that's why I like picking apart these different things and looking at the different perspectives. But to me, I've never imagined a future without it. It was always hey, here's the awesome fast network to do stuff in. And here's Ethereum where people are still going to want to play. Maybe they, use Fiat and other projects for leverage and on all this other stuff. But it's like kind of like the playground. We got a new playground in a different city, and people can choose like which one they want to go to. I think the choice is powerful, and it's in people's best interest on eHex to want a bigger price too. You want to support it if you have a bag of it. So unless you sold out and you got everything on PulseChain now, which maybe some people did or they didn't, but that's all personal. That's all personal market decision. That's not. I don't think the narrative has changed from whatever RH is going to set it in stone to be next time he speaks. I hope at least. But
yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that because, or some of what's happening with those derivatives, because actually the ratios on hex to hex between the two are better than the other derivatives. Go have a look at the hedron to hedron ratio right now. I think it's like 1 to 1.4, 1 to 1.5, maybe even worse, right? So like people believe in eHex more than they believe in eHedron, for example. So there's some interesting dynamics happening there as well.
And some of that is that's a bit of like seeing like a relatively like small ecosystem or like an immature market where in a lot of like legacy fields, you wouldn't see those things get that far off, right? So if like, generally you kind of see like precious metals have some set of an ebb and flow. Like you wouldn't see like the ratio of like platinum to gold get that far out of whack, or silver and these things. But when it comes to Hedron, ICOSA, like these systems here, and we saw this at Pulse launch, right? Like there's just less participants. There's all these small things around where there's not as many players. So you get the spreads essentially get farther. So there's a lot of value to extract if people understand some of these nuances and take the time to look through, because in general, things ebb and flow back to their kind of that original, symbiosis between all those assets.
Yeah, and that arbitrage is more possible now that bridge is more empty and processing things faster. You were looking at things in the first couple of days of launch and seeing arbitrage opportunities that you just couldn't take advantage of, unfortunately. And they were unbelievable in some circumstances. They didn't last very long because people had the same idea you did, right? But now that bridge is empty, it's definitely, there are fewer opportunities, but they're still there if you're paying attention.
Especially on the idea of accumulation, right? Like I think that's one thing that separates when people are talking. I mean, like using dollars is an easier thing to communicate most of the time, but like when you're talking about the spreads on eHex or any of these other things, to me, the dollars on none of this stuff matters. It's all just about accumulation, right? Like I just want huge exposure to all these things that I think will go up in the future. And so, the arbitrage spread, like some of these spreads on a lot of this stuff is way tighter because there were some pretty juicy opportunities there for a couple of days. But especially if people are looking at this as accumulation, there's opportunity everywhere.
Yeah, one of my onboards said that to me yesterday, which was very gratifying that he'd got to that point, right? He was just like, look, I did some trading, I moved back and forward, and he didn't even mention the USD value of the things that he's trading. He's just like, hey, I've got 20,000 more hex than I had yesterday. And that's fantastic, right? If you can get the people that you're working with who are trying to get up to speed with their technical knowledge or their market knowledge to start thinking in terms of exactly what WaLLrus is saying, right? Accumulation of coins. Hey, we've won. This is where it happens, right? The USD value will take care of itself.
100% agree.
Yeah. Very good, objective, nuanced conversation. That's what I like to have. It's no holy wars, just like talking about the facts and talking about it's the amazing stuff. We're so lucky to be here right now. Like again, everyone zoom out. You're sad, you're mad, tempers, this and there. It's just like, just zoom out. Like you're lucky to find such an amazing ecosystem and be able to participate in the first place. That's what I'm grateful for that. I'm like constant gratification, constant gratitude. There you go. Gratification. One of those. But I want to talk about what is left. And we'll wrap up on this the next few minutes. What is left in the ecosystem? Like what is, single sign staking. A lot of people are happy about that or excited about that. Be able to do something with their PulseX finally, that now that a lot of community projects haven't launched, that maybe, building on it and all that. But what in the next, we're 2 weeks in the next 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, what do you think we're going to see come out? Do you think we're going to, is it just going to be mostly PulseX updates, or what are you all excited for? Even third-party products and stuff. What should we be looking out for on the Twitter? Is it going to be the next blow-up comment of like, oh my God, this thing happened, or is it just more pulls are getting pulled and finished? What do you all think? Whoever wants to start first.
I mean, I think a lot of it's going to be the third-party stuff, right? So let's see, we're probably, what's the date now? 45 days, give or take, getting our stuff out. I think that's when the magic will really start. So I think we'll see the drip, right, of some of this stuff from PulseX, limit orders and a few different things. That should be really enjoyable. I think again, giving people some tools, right? And like to the comment, I think it was New World Order, the comment just that people are like learning so much here. That stuff's really like the conversation that we're having. Not only is it enjoyable between us, but the fact that there's people listening that actually care about that conversation is like really, really valuable. So whatever people take out of this after that, like as they move on, like they're going to be infinitely more ready for more opportunities, dialing in for the next bull run, when it comes to order execution or looking at ARBs or how to understand is like, some of this pricing stuff. So people should definitely be sharpening their teeth right now. And I'm very glad to see that. I think mostly it's support, right? I think it's seeing all the support come around PulseChain from other people in the industry. And then as all the community stuff starts to come out here as we go, I don't know what the next big firecracker will be, but I just know that basically the next 90 days or so, we're just going to have, again, even though the liquidity is there in the sense of like, hey, it's not like day one launch, liquidity is still thin, moved across a lot of these things. There's all these interesting opportunities that people are seeing. There's what goes on with the ink. The ink is kind of a big driver of the system right now because most of the yield coming out is from farms and LPing. So it'll be really cool to see the exchanges. Again, obviously we have Fiat and those guys, they'll be out sooner rather than later, Buck and Dylan and all that team. But it'll be cool to see how much gamesmanship comes from I guess what I'm really trying to get to is it'll be gamesmanship from outside the ecosystem that I think is be interesting. How many of these big influencers want to come talk and chill? How many people want to come pump new meme coins on here? How many people want to go launch on TrustSwap? how many exchanges are really bringing in people if they want to do futures or spot or leverage or whatever the kind of stuff that they're trying to get into. So I think that it's going to be I think it's just the wave of interest coming, and hopefully we get to see a lot of that price positive nature as well.
Just add on that too, Stoic. What do you think that Richard has not revealed yet? Do you think there's any more tricks? You know, the PLS burning of the Genesis validators was surprising. INC kind of shocking for most people, I think. And is there anything else you could see even RH talking about that's like, whoa, this whole another pump middle he hasn't even revealed yet? But other than like wallet sacrifice and all the stuff that we have no idea when it's going to happen or if at this point.
Look, I think we've gotten as much as we can expect from Richard, and I think the no expectations thing kind of has to really be solidified at this point, right? Like if any new features are coming to this chain, they need to be built by other people, and we can't sit around waiting for Richard to hand us down a wallet or hand us down an exchange or whatever else it is. Frankly, I would prefer that he didn't. I want him to go move on to longevity tech. You know, let him go help. Like my parents are going to be 70 soon. Like I'd like him to figure that out so that I can have them around for another 40 years. So, you know, expectations on PulseChain, I'm good. He's done as much as he needs to, and it's up to us to go fix any problems that are there. Or frankly, like we as a community have the same challenges that all other blockchains have, right? Is new users taking them away from TradFi and bringing them here and showing them that it's better, and building the tools that give them sovereignty and freedom and access. And that's where we're going to win. So, you know, I don't expect anything more from Richard is what I'm trying to say. And I don't feel like we should be putting it on him or giving him any sort of personal requirements or giving him any sort of, literally expectations, right? Like he's done his bit. He's been doing it for 5 years, sometimes longer if you think about his education stuff. And you know, it's up and it works and everybody's thrilled with it. And hey man, go take a break, go to the clubs, do whatever you want to do, man. We've got this from here.
Yeah, I love that you touched on, you know, his mission, glory. He wants to help people in real life, save your life, longevity research, SINS Foundation, LAV Foundation, all that stuff. I'm big into Scivive and a lot of people who read this work and can understand its mission really buy in the ecosystem more. You know, if you've been here longer than a couple weeks, then and you're not sure why this guy does what he does, please go back and watch old videos. Go to my channel. I've clipped 200 plus videos how he was before crypto and how he wants to be afterwards. But yeah, I think it's logical to think we will see at some point RH step away after, you know, he's taken us to the promised land, hopefully. And he's done all that he could, and we don't have any expectations of anything else. I told the other day on Twitter, and he actually wrote back and said thank you, which was surprising. I don't usually see that, about just having so much gratitude towards, you know, the movement of what he's built, how he's built it, and the reason why it exists, and the community that's the foundation. The only reason it even exists and is successful is because the community bought into it and said, hey, we can make a better world. We can make a better crypto ecosystem. We can be a force for good. And that's a lot of people miss that, which is a tragedy.
So in line with what you're saying there, Max, like a lot of this is, I can't remember the person who said it, but you know, the founding father who mentioned it's your republic if you can keep it, right? Like there are forces out there that are going to try and take this away, right? They're going to come after it from a regulatory standpoint, a legislative standpoint, in courts, in different markets. And it's our responsibility to make sure that we protect it. So there's a lot of stuff that needs to go into that. And there's lobbying, there's super PACs, there's advertising, there's getting in touch with political figures. You know, there's a huge amount of stuff that needs to be done, you know, outside of the building and the mad gains, right? It's a republic. If we can keep it, we got to do that. And so the next sort of evolution of this is working with those industry partners like Library or Coinbase and going up against regulators and stuff, because, you know, like I said, it will try to be taken away. There's a lot of money that wants to see this not be successful. And so we've got to fight back in some of those cases.
Well, Let's wrap up on the macro too, just for a moment, because I had an interesting conversation with Brandon B yesterday on stream, and there's a lot of people have the narrative too that, hey, none of this stuff matters, it's all noise or accumulation phase. You could say too, until 2024, 2025, when things kick off, Bitcoin happening, all that stuff. Just briefly, what are your opinions on that? Like, are you all looking for any kind of like pump later this year, or is PulseChain issuing us into the bull run, or is it literally like the timing of the markets as far as Bitcoin happening goes? How do you all think about that? Start with WaLLrus.
So the macro is obviously always very, very complicated. I think the thing to remember is similar to like what we saw early in the year with Hex, is that you can still have these opportunities to make huge. I mean, there was a low of what 1.8, 1.9 previously before the recent 1 cent low, and that it would have given you a 5x, right? And in a few months, it had you hit bottom and top, which you can rarely do. So call it a 2 or 3x. Like 2 or 3x is a lot of money, again, in some of these short terms here. So I think when it comes to like PulseChain specifically, why people might ask, remember that when it's this small and this new, it does not have to follow that general rhyme and reason. So, again, say we take a 20% dip when XYZ event happens in the future. Well, if you're up 4x, you probably still wanted to be on that ride, So I think part of it is I'm not saying that there won't be better buying opportunities in the future. No one ever really knows. But when it comes to accumulation on a lot of the assets around PulseChain and things like that, I would say that when things are brand new and early and possibly at their local low or maybe all-time lows, to not let too much of the macro scare you away from your DCA or your accumulation. But overall, there's a lot of noise. I think that we'll see how the yield curve plays out with the bond markets and a few things toward the end of the year. There's a lot of concerns with commercial real estate and trying to get some of those things refinanced where people have much shorter term notes than what we see with like residential or personal homes. So there's still a lot to shake out. Crypto is not decoupling the way we think, but is starting to be more coupled to other markets. And I think that that's what's kind of caused a decoupling a bit of some of the legacy things that we're used to seeing. And in some ways is because it's actually connected to a larger variety. So it's almost aggregated across all these other markets. So as Saudi and Dubai and Hong Kong and Malaysia and all these other places start to have better rules, Europe with MiCA and a few things, not necessarily that I agree with them, but the rules are clear. It makes it easier for business to step up. So there's just more pumps that can inject value and capital into the ecosystem. So yes, I do agree with, I think, a lot of the sentiment from Gammon or Sailor or some of these things, but we're at a point now where crypto is developed enough that people can just escape from those things into crypto, not just be a leverage effect on it as well. Although again, I still think that for the next cycle, it's still going to be very much a leverage effect on the macro factors. But I would balance that between remembering that this is a small microcosm, and that when it's essentially a leveraged event down at the end of all this macro events, there can still be a lot of positive price movement. So don't think all the markets are going to be better in 18 months and think that there's not a reason to buy between now and then. I think that's got it. Again, just remember that when it's small, it can still pump very, very, very hard. But again, I think I kind of agree that the bottom is not in on the overall markets.
Yeah, I'd say it's a little bit market dependent. Segmenting out developing world or underdeveloped world from the US especially. I think if you're looking at the US, the key thing that I'd be looking at is household debt. I think it's kind of becoming pretty concerning, especially when you see the number of not home loans, but auto loans that are resulting in default and people having cars repossessed and things like that. It's a little bit difficult to put some money into ETH when you can't drive, right? Like that's a challenge. But then if you go outside the US and look at it a little bit more broadly, I mean, what's Argentina's inflation right now? 107%?
I think it was 110 plus.
110? Yeah. So there you go. Like, do you want to be sitting in pesos if that's what's going on? So, probably not. So the macro stuff is very, very different depending on when you are, or where you are, excuse me. And so, just because exactly what WaLLrus is saying, right? Like you might have people in the US who are needing to sell something in the short term to cover some of those debts, but you've got other people who are outside in the broader world who can't afford to be sitting in the thing they have, and they need to put it into something safer. And crypto can be that for a lot of people because at least it's accessible.
Many chances we get a mini bull run in the PulseChain ecosystem this year, you gentlemen think? Like a 10x, 20. I mean, not just some kind of like event that's like, whoa, everyone's coming in. We've 5x volume. Binance is CZ shaking RH's hand. Not quite like that, but like something where it's like, okay, now people are putting a lot of money into this. Is there a chance of that, or are we just accumulate? You guys just accumulating. You kind of in that zone until you see something.
I mean, we can look at historical things, right? Like you can look at the adoption amplifier and maybe, take some guidance from how that operated. It looks like it's relatively similar in terms of economic flows to what we've got right now, right? Huge amount of buildup with a lot of PR over a long period of time that was dumped into it. And then, very quickly a drop off that lasted a couple of months. 5-6 weeks after launch, you got really the bottom in the AA and even in Uniswap V1. And then you had a periodic, very, very stable growth, right? As more people found out about it and more people were dumping economic value into it. So, it's not a one-to-one corollary, but, that it certainly rhymes.
Gotcha. Last question, and then we will say our pieces. Pac-Man says, what do you guys think about the market cap talks at PLSX near Bitcoin cap that goes 10x? Yeah, basically, the market cap vanity metric, we've all heard the story around that. I'm trying to frame this. Does that scare people away when they see that PulseX and PulseChain are already billions of dollar market cap on launch? Or do we need people when we get the bull run, people are just going to buy it no matter what? Oh, it's, are they actually going to factor this in or see deeper into the ecosystem? How do you think that affects things that people think we have such a large market cap? All that OA aside, all that.
First of all, Pac-Man, you're always yelling at me. I'm not going to sell in a 10x. Calm down. It's not what I was saying. The other part is, let's see, how does he actually frame this question? What do you guys think about the market talks? So, I mean, this is something that like the community is always going to be contrarian on because and I actually think sometimes we're too critical on the metric. So there are ways to take it and frame it closer. So if you just take market cap and you just say, all right, what's the number? Okay. Then exactly like what you're saying here, it's ridiculous. It makes no difference. There's no physics around market cap where when you hit this, it starts to do this. If you hit it here, it does this. It doesn't matter, right? Where it can be useful is if you're taking market cap and it's between similar things, then it can be an indicator, right? It can be part of analysis, right? So from market cap, what we're really trying to derive in some general localized form is how much value can move the price against where I want it to go, right? That's what we're trying to get out of market cap. So if a market cap is, again, all things being equal, one's $1 billion, one's 10 billion, there's more sell value. There's more potential energy there to drive the price down. So the reason it doesn't really matter in crypto is because these things are not very similar and there's almost nothing you can derive from the raw number. So most people would exactly like what you're saying there, a 10x, like is that some unthinkable amount of value for Pulse and PulseX? Oh, like that's a very realistic threshold to hit in some variation of near future, right? And also what it would take and how much value would be supporting that theoretical market cap number wouldn't even be 10% of what it is in Bitcoin. So again, there's just so much more nuance. It's the same thing as like saying a chart. If you see a 30% drawdown in Pulse, like billions of dollars disappeared, right? Or hundreds of millions of dollars disappeared. Whereas like what you'd see in Bitcoin, there'd be more real value there attached because more liquidity would have actually changed hands. So again, it's just a piece of a puzzle. But I think to your point, RHMax, no, it doesn't really matter. No, it doesn't really matter about when they're going to buy a certain thing. And then the other part is it can be shocking. So like this something goes all the way back, and I'll try to wrap it up, get off my soapbox. Back to with like Clay from Nomics, when he was like trying to look at taking away like the OA versus staked coins. So not only are we a very market cap doesn't matter community, but most of the stuff, most of the ticker symbols in our space actually are relatively difficult to calculate market cap on. Like with Hex, are you going to count what's liquid? Are you going to count what's staked? What's staked and coming out in 3 months? What could be EES total? Are you counting away? Like there's actually quite a bit of discussion there. So I think it's relatively not that helpful, especially when you look at like what's available, OA wallets and those things. But it's one of those that I would, if you're going to be one that's in front and talking about it, spend some time to get sharp. There's a lot of nuance there, and it's going to repeatedly come up. So if you're someone who speaks in any of these circles or Twitter spaces or tweets at those big guys, take some time dialing that wording, because you're probably going to say it a lot.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's interesting. It's this whole ecosystem is just it's batshit crazy sometimes, in a good way. And we get ourselves into all these situations where like, okay, how do we talk about this in an accurate but representative way that makes, us not look like the loon birds? Because, as Richard said, in the highest of stakes, whenever that thing comes out, those are the ones going to be in the 1% one day, because they know what's up. But anyways, so Stoic sounds like next week, beta. You said 1 week, 2 weeks until we can try something?
Yeah, we'll be up US users in beta next week. We've had a really good response for people wanting to sign up for beta. I think we decided originally we were going to cap it at 500 users. We've now extended that out to 1,000. And so if you do want to test the beta with us and have a go, then I would suggest jumping onto, if it's okay if I just shield the link here quickly, 0xCoast.com/beta to sign up. Spots are going pretty quickly, so I would do it as fast as you can. And then it's really just a matter of how quickly we can work on those couple legal things to have some CSC up. And I mean, I'm sorry to be excited to get off the call, but I can't wait to go call some of my product guys so that we can work this out, because we might be working some late nights the next few days.
Let's go.
Yeah, no, completely understandable. It's amazing stuff. I get super excited every time I talk to you guys. WaLLrus too. You said 45 days, or when are we going to be able to play with liquid loans?
Yep. So again, go use the testnet. Everything's up there. The LP rewards, all that functionality is all there. We're going to leave that up even after mainnet. So that'll be a great tool for onboards or for people who want to, practice some of these strategies along the way. They should be using testnet now. Like it's all there. The analytics are super clean. There's a lot of information in the DApp. You can click like the loan, USDL, and Pulse, get contracted addresses. All that functionality is built into the DApp. It's extremely clean. It's very pretty. There's a lot of the explainer videos that are in there. It's one of those things that there's a lot of value. There's a lot of things to use. It takes some time to like work out, because a lot of times if you're using liquid loans, usually you're going to be using it almost to capture yield somewhere else. So it's almost part of a bigger play. But the testnet's there. It's testnet.liquidloans.io. Like, please go check it out. Like it's really clean. It's all up there. Yeah, we're roughly 45 days. So for us, we'll have Gnosis up for everyone to go play with. We have a very stripped down version that we're going to put out. It's kind of something that we needed, that we think is a tool the community will probably use. So CC will have some more information on that here pretty quick. Kind of give some the layout on how that'll go. And then Fetch, the Oracle, will be out before LL, probably a week, give or take, on some time there. And then finally, we'll have the DApp live. So yeah, we'll have everything coming out here pretty quick. A lot of times, again, we just say 60 days only because we just don't keep track of the days as we're sitting here posting everything. But yeah, we're roughly 45 now. We might move it around a bit to have it on a date where the date's clean, just for like analytics, contract launch, little things, just to be extra clean. So again, it's right around that time frame. We're gonna have all the stuff coming out. Again, it's right there on testnet. Like that's the magic right there. So if anyone has any questions, reach out to us. We've got all kinds of cool stuff coming. We have a bunch more media explainers. We have a huge blog. We're just unloading information. So everyone take a look, play with the testnet, and let us know if you have any questions.
Live on testnet, and live next week for Stoic and 0xCoast crew. And yeah, follow Liquid Loans on YouTube. And I follow them. I watch WaLLrus' videos just about it. Every time he posts them, I'm like, oh, cool update. I want to get the nuance about yield farming real quick. So super quick, short to the point from a very galaxy brain type of gentleman. And then 0xCoast. So you all have a YouTube channel now, and you posted Twitter Space. Is that what it was the other day?
Yeah, we did a Q&A. It took about an hour and a half to go through some of the finer points of how we decided on banking partners, what the custody arrangement is for coins that are stored with our services. So you can find that at 0xCoast on YouTube. I don't think there's a lot of information there right now, but we're certainly working on getting more up. And a lot of what we're doing at the moment is just documenting everything, trying to make helpful tutorials, getting live chat, working on the DApp and everything like that. So, huge focus on as much support as we can provide to new users, because we're mindful that a lot of people coming in will be brand new to crypto. So, not only are we, doing product design and doing token design, but as much support as we can get. So if you have questions, you have comments, feel free to just jump on that live chat feature and someone will get back to you as soon as possible.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, excellent conversation, gentlemen. I just noticed your suit, WaLLrus. I didn't even think about it. I was like, whoa, that is a nice suit. Good job.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Let me know who your tailor is. That is you're looking good, man. You're looking good, looking fit, looking healthy. I'm sure Stoic is too. In that picture, that's a very manly picture. I like that as well.
Chad.
Yeah, he's got the Chad beard. But man, you got the little tissue in there too.
Oh,
wow,
pocket square.
Yeah, looking sharp, man. Looking sharp. Everyone, follow these guys on.
Just so Twitter. Everybody knows, RH is not the only one. We do not stream in pants, so I've got shorts on underneath as well. So
nice.
Yeah, not that classy.
Dude, I literally think nobody can see my bottom half, but I literally think sometimes I should just do it in underwear or shorts sometimes. I mean, I am in shorts right now, but I'm in shorts and t-shirt. It makes more sense to do shorts. But anyways, I contemplate, streaming without pants sometimes. It's just kind of nobody would know, right? Nobody would know.
Nice.
So, anyways, everyone, smash all the buttons if you like. Appreciate everyone joining for the conversation. Sorry I couldn't get all the questions, but yeah, we had a lot of internal questions to go over, and I want to cover a lot of topics. So we hit a lot of stuff today. So if you're just joining in, hit the replay gang, rewind, and Scivive and 5555. We are out.